it's a very important issue. It's a very important issue. I think it's the defining issue of our times, as certainly in the sense of the free press. There is no bigger issue. It affects everybody, including us here. But should thing that everybody is going to take on board, hopefully. But get down and show your support for this issue. So now we're going to talk about something that's also very much in the public eye right now. If you've watched the news in the last few weeks, you would have seen this phenomenon, this campaign. There's a movement called Extinction Rebellion. And this has been very high profile, especially in the UK. There's been a number of major protests and disruptions in London. And this has kind of gotten very good media coverage, Mike. And this is stretching all the way to the Heathrow runway project now this week. And so we're seeing a lot of talk about Extinction Rebellion. There's also a new face, if you will, for the climate change movement. A young teenager from Sweden. Her name is Greta Thunberg. And she's the new face, if you will, of this issue. And our next guest has done a pretty extensive research series looking at this and the deeper aspects of this issue, the deeper aspects of environmentalism, of grassroots organizing. And Cory Morningstar is an independent journalist and researcher who's done a 6-part series. This is linked on our show page right now to her blog, which is The Wrong Kind of Green. That's her. A lot of people might already be familiar with Cory's work, of course, but you can link to the 6-part series, The Manufacturing of Greta Thunberg for Consent, the Political Economy of the Non-Profit Industrial Complex. And this talks about the new Green Deal or the Green New Deal, depending on which one you're using there, that term. But what it does is really reveals an agenda of high finance, transnational corporate power, which is, Cory believes, and many others, by the way, this has successfully hijacked and is currently driving the current global grassroots, quote, green agenda that we're seeing right now. And you wouldn't know it unless you're really looking below the surface. So to help us navigate this, we're joined by Cory Morningstar. Hello, Cory.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Cory. And boy, Cory, you got quite a reaction already from these posts. These articles that you published have drawn a little bit of a reaction, even from some members of the mainstream media. It's really interesting watching this on social media. Of course, I'm familiar with your work because you did a lot of early research that helped to kind of expose the NGO complex, and that included the white helmets as well in Syria that a lot of people are familiar with, especially in this show and in Vanessa Beeley's work. But this subject, Cory, this is very deep. This goes really deep. And it's very complex, but, just in a nutshell, first of all, what drew your interest in this area of research, first of all? And then second of all, what exactly are we looking at here?
My background, I'm really super, sorry, I'm choking here. I'm an environmental activist. I'm interested in ecology. I'm anti-capitalist. I've been writing about the nonprofit industrial complex for about a decade now. And what drew me into it was being an on-the-ground activist and seeing, recognizing they didn't want to be aligned with any kind of radical actions. And basically they were barriers to creating any legitimate change. And just from being in the movement and enmeshed with all these NGOs that, I write about, I came to recognize that they claim to represent civil society, but they actually work hand in hand to protect the system and it's basically strengthen, accelerate, protect the very system. And they're not against corporations and CEOs, or not CEOs, but capitalism as people may think. They're actually all part of the same team. So it's basically them against the citizenry. And it's been really difficult. It's taken a long time to get that across because people they identify with a lot of the manufactured leaders of the movement. And they don't identify with people of the global south, and they don't identify with the people that, suffer the most from the current system, the current global system that we have dominating right now. So anyway, that's where I started writing about it. And then last year, I guess in November, Michael Walsh, another, he does interviews like you. Anyway, he called me and he asked me if I'd heard about Greta Thunberg, and I didn't know who that was. And he said, oh, it's this young girl with red, with these braids. Anyway, and I remembered I had started all seeing her, and I really, really tried to stay clear of, that type of sort of celebrity fet. Hang on, I have to get a drink.
Okay, so she's gone to get a glass of water, Mike. But
right here, sorry, I have something in my throat. Anyway, because I'd already seen her right away, when you start seeing someone like to that extent being pushed by the World Bank and that type of thing, something's up. And so even though I was already working on an Avaz piece, which it's an important piece, and I want to get back to it as soon as I'm done. Now I'm buried in this thing that's happening here. But I started looking at that, and it was just so amazing because it sort of, when I started writing 10 years ago about, tick, 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 and Greenpeace and GCCA, which is the Global Call for Climate Action, which is founded by 20 NGOs. Like, all these NGOs are aligned. And basically, Greta and what I saw being rolled into the public was sort of a culmination of what I had been writing about for the past decade, all coming into what we see happening right now. And so it really, really interested me. And then quite quickly, as soon as I started digging into who Greta Thunberg was, I right away found she's from a very elite background. Her mother's aligned with WWF, one of the co-founders, again, the GCCA. WWF, as you know, is notorious for displacing people in the global south in the name of conservation. They work with Monsanto in Paraguay. They're one of the most egregious corporations that there is. Anyway, her mother works with them, Greenpeace, famous opera singer, like basically Swedish royalty, with a very elite background. And then from there, I saw basically this young girl appeared out of nowhere, found on a sidewalk by CEO of a tech outfit called We Don't Have Time. Its founder is Ingmar Rentzhog. And then right away I saw that he was partnered with Al Gore's The Climate Reality Project. He just launched an app on Earth Day, and that app is actually in partnership with the World Bank, IKEA. It's really, really dense, but basically, first you'd have to walk through and take your time and really digest my articles. They're very, very dense and meticulous. And the purpose for that is, that's the type of research I do, but it's also so the information cannot be dismissed. It's really, really tight, factual based information. Like, this is basically walking people through an industry, a business model, how we protect and insulate the system and keep it intact so nothing else can be established. I know I'm sort of going all over the way here. Basically, what we're seeing right now is the New Green Deal is a part of the fourth industrial revolution. That's what it's called by the World Economic Forum, and the ruling classes, the power elites. The main NGOs involved are the World Resources Institute. It's basically, basically the economic growth is stagnant. It's been stagnant for years. Every time you turn around, you see a new article, economic growth and in a free fall. Capitalism is in trouble, out of Al Gore's mouth. Basically, the whole system is faltering. And so what we're seeing is this is not an emergency to do with the climate or for the protection of our natural world. The emergency is saving the system itself. Okay, so I think that's a super important message. This is not about protecting the natural world. This is about protecting the system that is in place, and that's the global capitalist economic system. That's what this is about. These people, they are exploiting Greta Thunberg and the youth, and you see behind them the same people, all again, Greenpeace, GCCA, the World Bank, they're all behind this. And basically what they do, they're creating basically this mobilization, and so they don't have to shove this down our throats. Like, in essence, they can socially engineer us to demand what they already have, this, quote unquote solutions that they have in store for us. And so Greta Thunberg and the youth that she's inspired, and the youth that are just basically being corralled, they call it herding cats. That's, their words. They capture this energy and they rechannel it back into the very system, destroying us and destroying our natural world and destroying the youth. So they're actually using the youth against their own futures. And it's horrible to watch. And people that do read the series, people react because people, let's face it, they've used Greta for a reason. People are very emotive when it comes to Greta. She's very well-spoken, very articulate, very difficult not to love. She is lovely. And people become emotionally attached, and they react. And so people have reacted initially with the series, but once they read it, they're blown away. And then they come to understand exactly what's happening. Yep. Should I pause there?
Yeah, just to clarify, I think the first point, the most important point, is when people see child Greta Thunberg really fronting the kind of effort, that a lot of people believe this is a grassroots, like she left school that day and did her protest at the Swedish government ministry office, and then that was photographed by a passersby, and it just went viral. It was organic. It was grassroots. And I think what Cory's just explained here, Mike, is that it wasn't grassroots. This was very carefully stage managed, and that she's not just any young teenager, 16-year-old. Her mother is, a national celebrity who works with WWF. Her father is also a celebrity who's also an active environmentalist. So she's voiced up as the face of this movement. Okay, that's the first thing to understand. So there's this term astroturfing. Okay, and I think this Cory's kind of describing this is a type of astroturfing. It's not grassroots. It's you could say fake grassroots. Okay, then there's this organization called I would call them a PR communications consultancy stroke tech firm, and they were initially backing her. They're called We Don't Have Time. This is a Swedish outfit. I'm just going to play you their opening gambit here. This was what they released to get the sort of campaign going. Listen to this.
We are running out of time. Right now, carbon dioxide emissions are being released at a staggering rate. Climate change will soon be self-fulfilling and unstoppable. The ice in the Arctic will no longer deflect sunlight, and the Siberian tundra is melting while releasing enormous quantities of methane gas into the atmosphere. We cannot turn the clock back. We are growing closer at an unprecedented speed to the point of no return. But there is still time to stop the emissions. So why do we not introduce a carbon dioxide tax now? Why is it we are not shifting to 100% renewable energies? How is it that nothing is being done? We have a solution. Right now, as we speak, we are building a social network, an arena where you and millions of people around the world will be able to watch who is really doing something to put an end to the climate crisis. An arena where you can look into what your politicians and business leaders are doing about climate change. Do they in fact take it seriously? Are they doing their job? Love bomb the ones in power that are actively looking for solutions, and climate bomb the ones that must do more. Nobody likes a bad rating. Nobody wants to be held accountable for the climate crisis. When the pressure is felt by the people in power, they will no longer be able to deny, mislead, or hide. They will have to change their ways. This is a time when together we can solve this crisis, a time of great change. We are working round the clock to create this social network, but you don't have to wait for us. At WeDon'tHaveTime.org, you can already send climate bombs, love bombs, and messages to chosen world leaders through social media. Remember, together we have the power, but we are running out of time.
Okay, so essentially, Cory, if I get this right, they're wanting to create, and this is really what Greta and others are driving, is a type of a TripAdvisor for climate change or for the environment. In other words, a rating system for for businesses, politicians, anybody, to name and shame or to sort of raise up your green rating, I guess. And they're wanting to monetize this. But what else does this company do?
Carbon offsets.
So they're going to be they're licensed to sell carbon offset credits.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. So it's carbon offsets, and then the other pillar would be advertising. And then the advertisers, of course, are all the people that actually are behind all of this, like Unilever and all the so-called, green. Like that's a huge new thing now, right? Like to repackage, like basically let's repackage capitalism as green. Let's reboot the system. The system needs a cash injection. In part, I think it's part 4. I explore how we'll save this system that we have, and it's basically the Climate Finance Partnership announced in 2018 at the One Planet Summit by Macron, and again, all the foundations involved that back these NGOs and fund them, and it's looking at the pensions, $100 trillion identified in pensions that we can access, and then reboot the whole economic system, which is basically going in. It's a green colonization of the global south. And then getting back to we don't have time, like what I think happened, it started coming out about, 3 weeks after I had published my first act, and I know other journalists in Sweden had were already picking up on it as well at the same time that something, was up with Greta Thunberg's, basically instantaneous rise to international stardom, and we don't have time. And so she put out a letter basically on February 11th addressing what she called rumors about we don't have time, and basically Ingmar Rentzhog had to be the fall. I think he basically had to be the fall guy. Like he just basically, Greta left her position as I think she was a youth trustee on We Don't Have Time, and he basically had to, take a hit for the team. That's how I see it, and just apologize for using her name numerous times in his business plan that resulted in, a round of funding, millions of dollars.
And there's another teenager, Jamie Margolin, who's the founder of Zero Hour. So this is the other teenage kind of celebrity, environmental celebrity, who is also on the board, I guess you could say, of... Yeah,
I think she's still on the board. And if you go, I think it's maybe the second act or the third, I do a whole act. And I've written about this quite a bit in the past as well. Like the youth are basically the sacrificial lambs for all of this. And especially now, they're like very, very much a target market. And now jumping again into another place, big part of this as well, which I haven't written about yet, is about the voting age being dropped to 16 to really capture this youth energy, and they're very, let's face it, they're 16, they're not experienced, they don't have life experience, they don't understand that, they don't understand the system, they don't understand history, they're naive, and they trust adults as they should. That's sort of, the real tragedy about this. Where are the adults protecting our youth and our children? And even Greta, I don't think anyone should be attacking her. It's the people behind her that we need to go after. If adults can't navigate through all of this, how can we possibly expect a child to? Who's teaching them, who's educating them? How are they supposed to know that they're being manipulated and maneuvered?
Yeah.
So, and then this all ties into, of course, WWF is at the forefront with Natural Capital Coalition and all the most powerful corporations on the planet in the financialization of nature. And that's under a campaign, and this has been in the works for a long time now. And, every year getting closer and closer. The reason it's an emergency now is just because the state of the economy is in such disarray. Like it's in, very, very, this is basically the time to make great changes if we want to make them. And instead, what this is about is saving the current power structures again. So I don't even know where I was going with that. The financialization of nature is called, right now the campaign is, and again, this is about framing and language, the campaign is called New Deal for Nature. And so you come in behind, you create this huge global acquiescence for a new Green New Deal, right? And that, again, Extinction Rebellion right from inception is calling for a new Green Deal, which was an American campaign at that time, like when they started back last September, with Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. Is that her name?
Yep.
So anyway, New Deal for Nature, financialization of nature, that is creeping in very, very subtly behind everything and happening right now. There's a huge meeting in Paris next month about that. No one knows about that. That right there tells you that these, the nonprofit industrial complex, they're involved in that. They're pushing that forward. So this is the monetization of all nature on the planet. Like this is actual payments for ecosystem services, again, which opens up, a whole new array of new markets, new markets. So again, it just all goes back over and over and over. New markets, everything's at scale, everything's, it's just a further massive plundering of the planet. Sorry. Go ahead.
Let me just put what you just said into kind of economic context, because then I think what Cory was just describing, Mike, was we have an economic system right now where all the projections are zero growth, get used to zero growth, and negative growth in some cases, okay? The only thing that's been propping up the global financial system in the last, say, 15, 20 years has been things like derivatives and exotic financial products, basically the securitization of junk bonds, basically inventing, securitized financial products out of thin air, selling them and trading them on the futures markets. And when the bottom collapses, then the governments will come in for a bailout and bail out the banks. And meanwhile, they've already cashed in their bonus checks. That's basically what happened with the subprime mortgage crash in 2008 in a nutshell. Okay, so what Cory's describing here is they have identified a potential new market. Okay, what is that market? It's the commodification of nature, of the global natural resource pool. They're wanting to put a price on it. So who is behind the Green New Deal? Who is behind Extinction Rebellion? Who is behind Greta Thunberg? Okay, these are economists. These are bankers. Okay, they're going to create green derivatives. They're going to trade them. They're going to create. They're going to securitize and repackage carbon offsets. They're going to put a value on the global forests, and there's going to be lots of accounting structures, a new framework, a new economic framework, and they're going to profit off this. So it's a whole new profit center potentially by basically reconfiguring the global economy to create this new systems, and it has a political framework as well. And so what you're saying, Cory, is that carbon neutral or what they call net zero emissions, that doesn't mean zero emissions.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just
part of the scam. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, like net zero does not mean zero. And actually, one of the key leaders of Extinction Rebellion, and I'm going to see if I can find her name here. Her last name is Ammon. She was an author of basically helped midwife the 2015 Paris Agreement with Christiana Figueres. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name correctly. And anyway, she's an Extinction Rebellion leader. She's helped midwife that agreement. Net zero, in her own words, does not mean net zero. It's interchangeable with carbon neutrality. So carbon capture storage is a huge part of this as well. And the same people that are pushing forward the new Green Deal are actually letting legislation pass in the U.S. on carbon capture storage. And they propose, if you look back into carbon tracker documents, another player in this, anyway, they are looking at 3,800 carbon capture storage facilities by 2050. I mean, that's a massive amount of plundering. All this is just like I know I keep saying it over and over again, like just further plundering.
Cory, it's a new industry, what you just described, right? It's like a brand new industry, and whoever's on the ground level of that industry.
Exactly. Like the greatest climate wealth opportunity that's ever risen. And then you've got the thing about Greta. Okay, so her number one thing, and basically she says this over and over and over, her only demand is to align with the Paris Agreement. And she'll say that's my only demand. That's, and she'll speak on behalf of all the climate march strikes. And she says that's our only demand. That's all we want, align with the Paris Agreement. Well, that's the key to legislation, getting the legislation in place municipally, regional, national. So that's what you see happening at this moment. The cities declaring climate emergency, you get the legislation in place. And then that's when you can start, now we've got the legislation in place, now we need the money, right? So that's the first part of it. But if you look back, one of the best ecologists and economists is Clive Spash of Vienna. And when he's written a paper, and it's called "This Changes Nothing," and it's very, very simple paper, 2 or 3 pages. It's specific to the Paris Agreement, and he says in the paper, the targets and promises of the Paris Agreement bear no relationship to biophysical or social and economic reality. I mean, so again, not about the planet, not about protecting nature. It's about further destruction of an already decimated planet in service to capital, in service to billionaires, maintaining their status and privilege.
So Cory, what you just described there is the new green economy. You're saying that it could be, quote, carbon neutral on paper, according to the new app that everyone's going to, have on their phones and businesses and whatever. But in reality, there's no change in consumption, pollution, deforestation, nuclear waste exposure, for instance. So that's basically what you've described there, right?
Yeah, and I mean, you can see that there's nothing, like militarism is one of the driving forces of ecological degradation on the planet. Emissions, pollution, I mean, I don't have to tell you, I think you already know that. There's no mention, and there never will be. The recent coup attempt against Venezuela. I mean, if you're environmental, if you want protection of the natural world, you have to fight against the military-industrial complex. We have to dismantle that. There's no resolving our planetary ecological crises without addressing that. You will not find any of those NGOs or Extinction Rebellion ever addressing that. And even when they have, they went from 0 groups October 31st, and by December 6th, they had 130 groups worldwide. Now it's up to 400. I think if you go through their Twitter feed, you will not find one reference. They didn't campaign, against that attempted coup in Venezuela. Just like Avaz tells us, save the planet, 12 years, save the planet. We're going to die, 12 years, save the planet, to bring all this, the fourth industrial revolution on board. And meanwhile, they were the ones, Avaz up to their necks in blood, Libyan people. They're the ones that have been in servitude to empire to push forward these imperialist invasions. Libya, Syria, they've had their hand in Africa. They're all over the place. So you've got these NGOs that are destroying our natural environment in many different realms, campaigns, and service to their funders and service to the ruling class that they are part of. And at the same time, pretending we're saving the planet through these mobilizations that they've created.
I think the Indian author, the author of The God of Small Things, Arundhati Roy, has so many great quotes, and she's one of the first people to really kind of articulate this idea of the not-for-profit, the NGO complex, and she called it the exquisite art of corporate philanthropy. And there's this great quote that I pulled, actually. You actually have one of her videos, early videos, I think, on one of your articles, but she said, she said, how do you vacuum up people's fury and redirect it into a blind alley? And I heard that and I thought, wow. So she's talking about this, the funded NGO boom really coincided with the neoliberal market reforms of the late 1980s and early 1990s. And this is when you saw the NGO industrial complex kind of mushroom at that point. But that just gives you an idea of the marketing of NGOs. Most people are supporting charities and NGOs because they see them as doing things that government can't do or government won't do, and they seem to have people donating to them, so there's people power behind them. But in reality, nowadays, behind most major NGOs that you see, you have major corporations. You have major foundations that are funded by some of the biggest oligarchs on the planet. That's a fact.
Yeah, not to interrupt, sorry to interrupt, but I just don't want to lose this thought. Right now, the piece I'm working on, I've just doing some calculations from Oak Foundation, just for, I believe this is since 2009. If people only knew the money. So this is from one foundation, right? Just one, to, I've only done about 10, 12 different groups. But for example, Oak Works to Climate Works, which has played a huge part in the Paris agreements with the GCCA, which is all these 20 NGOs I read about. They're $167 million. That's one foundation to one group. WWF, $23,834,000. It just goes on and on. $354 million. Amnesty, $3,600,000. Carbon Tracker, just under $2 million. Greenpeace, $10,535,000. Human Rights Watch, $12,981,000. Purpose, just under $5 million. Rockefeller is in there, $17 million. World Resources Institute, under $6 million. That's just one foundation, right? And these groups are getting money from, for example, the Blended Finance Partnership, which will be the group that goes in and finds all the money for the new, jumpstart of the green capitalist global economy. The money is mind-blowing, right? I mean, numbers where you're not even sure, is that 16 million? Is that 167 million? I mean, it's just like a massive, people just have no idea. And then, you'll have Avaz asking people in Brazil to give them money. I mean, it's sickening, right? Mm-hmm. And you've got the CEOs or the founders and CEOs taking home over, six-figure salaries, over $200K a year, asking poor people to give, $1 or $2 to them. Like, it's sickening.
Yeah. I think, I'll talk about Brazil in a second, but the whole idea behind the natural capital, okay, as an example, and Mike, you might weigh on this because you know a little bit about hedge funds, okay, that if you wanted to get some carbon credits, for instance, or cash in on biofuels, then the palm oil industry, this is one example, cut down the natural forests to make room for this cash crop, okay? This cash crop, you can sell the palm oil as biofuel, but you also get carbon offset credits if you can buy carbon offset credits, or if you invest in this sort of green business as well, selling carbon credits off of palm oil plantations, okay? So this is just one example. This is the economic development they're talking about. It's not conserving, it's not saving the virgin Amazon rainforest. It's about creating this new financialized economy.
That's right, and anybody that's watching British television in the last couple of weeks will have seen Shell. Now, Shell is not renowned as being a green company. It's a hydrocarbons company, one of the biggest on the planet. Shell is advertising to sell you give your electricity supply 100% from renewable sources. And how are they doing that? They're doing that by buying renewable energy certificates. Right, so obviously they cannot, because electricity is not storable. There's no massive battery that they can pump energy from.
Big green battery.
There's no big green battery out there that they can pump energy from solar panels or from windmills to. If once the energy is generated, it's generated, it goes onto the grid. If it's not used, it's lost. So they have created these renewable energy certificates, and if you buy renewable energy certificates, you're guaranteeing apparently to the person who's purchasing on a retail basis the electricity that it came from a renewable source, which of course it most likely didn't. The point is, of course, that at this point so-called renewable energy is significantly higher priced than energy from other types of power stations, and therefore there's big profits to be made by pulling this. Tesco's a couple of years ago, the biggest supermarket in the UK, claimed that they were going to be 100% powered by renewable energy through the same scheme, and it's a scam. It's a marketing scam.
And an accountancy shell game,
right? As well.
Cory, is this similar to what the green economy is?
Well, I mean, that's part of it. I mean, people don't understand or don't want to know because they'd rather believe, in an illusion that can allow them to continue to live every day and not worry about things. But I mean, the renewable energies are founded on fossil fuels. I mean, they're completely dependent on fossil fuels. So what you have is more of everything. And not just that, they require massive amounts of mining. Like I said, 4 to 5 times the mining that we're already, using is required for this fourth industrial revolution. And you can find papers from academic scientists cautioning these people writing up these deals that they don't even know if we have, if we can find this amount. You've got robots being developed to go down and mine the ocean floors. Great, big, massive robots. I mean, you've got biology down in the ocean You've got microbes, organisms that we don't even understand what they do for our ability as species to survive up here above the ocean, but we're going to go down there too and destroy it all. I mean, come on, this is not environmentalism. Plundering to save, to quote unquote save the climate, that is not environmentalism. This is not it's just really, really, really grotesque. And these renewable energies, turbines, solar panels, they're all being, designed to become obsolete. I mean, this is the system that we have designed. We don't want things to last. You got to keep producing, churning up all the live material into products that can go, end up in the landfill. And so you already have now, because each thing basically has a life at the max of about 20 years, you've already got turbines and panels and everything starting to accumulate that no one even knows what we're going to do with them.
Well, that's absolutely right. You only have to go, Patrick, 10 miles outside Plymouth into Cornwall, and you've got a whole wind farm up there which is sitting idle and rusting away. Right. And it's going to sit there. We're destroying our environment to save our environment. This is crazy.
So what the Bank of England governor, Mark Carney, was talking about, we need to unlock the funding for, the green technology and the green economy. This is what Alexander Ocasio-Cortez's new Green Deal or Green New Deal is about. They're saying green tech, we need to invest green tech. So we need to take the money from the pensions. There's $100 trillion sitting in pensions. It's meant to be paid out to people who've worked for it over the years, the older generation, right, who are getting older, by the way, and living longer in some cases. Not in some countries, though, not in Britain, according to the latest things. But anyway, so my point is the green tech. Okay, under Obama, there was a solar company called Solyndra, and they were handpicked by the administration, given $500 million in a green grant, government grant. This is the forerunner to the new Green Deal. And guess what? Did they produce one solar panel? No, they didn't produce one thing. They just ate up $500 million. That's one example. So Cory, I see a potential for huge boondoggle projects with the new Green Deal.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is based on technology that doesn't even exist yet, right? Like even Mission Innovation, which is Bill Gates, has now partnered with Annex I countries. And so basically you have one of the richest men on the planet, but, we can't have him actually investing in magical technology to save, the Western lifestyle. And so you have to have hardworking people put up the capital to take the risk. If there's money to be made, it goes to Gates. If it's to be lost, the people lose their pensions. It's just, if this is an emergency, you keep hearing 12 years emergency. If this is an emergency, why are we still producing leaf blowers? Why are we still producing 90% of the shit that no one needs that ends up in the landfill in 90 days? If this is an emergency, this is not about getting people out of cars and onto public transportation. This is about 1 billion new cars, right? If we see that happen, if you see like a huge surge happen for lithium, you can kiss Bolivia goodbye. We see what happens to countries with resources. All of a sudden the presidents are, killing the indigenous population and the army is raping the women, and in we go, right? And slaughter, take everything. It's just the same old, rinse, lather, repeat operation over and over again. And again, like this XR business, you've got when it came out last week, and I'm sure you saw that, the XR business component that they launched. Mm-hmm. Did you see that? Like one of the people that one of the signatories was John Elkington, I believe. Volans, I've written about him in the past. Michael Swift, he does a lot of work on carbon capture storage and payments for ecosystem services. He did a meme for me out of my work that I found, and he says who will be the Bill Gates of the ecosystem services. over and over, all these people, all these papers, it's the same people, the same NGOs, it's the same. I mean, it's just, like I said, people are really going to, if they can take the time, find the time to get through this, they're really going to understand the system a lot better, how it works. And I think it's so important, because I think it's really important to dismantle the nonprofit industrial complex so we can give room to the grassroots, who are completely marginalized and crushed under the weight of the nonprofit industrial complex.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you say ecosystem services, what Cory's talking about there is this concept in this new green economy that you have to put a price on everything, including, say, if you're building a factory over there, you're cutting down X amount of trees. There's a cost to that. Use of the land, displacement of whatever animals live there, and so forth. And so there's a cost that needs to be paid for that. So they're basically going to commodify every single blade of grass, every insect, every bit of whatever. And so then this is going to be, funneled into some kind of a slush fund, or it can be offset by investment into carbon neutral or carbon offset businesses. And how are those going to be regulated? Because there was a huge amount of fraud uncovered as well with some of the so-called carbon offset projects, planting trees in India, the trees that got sold 5 times. Okay. The offsets get resold for the same thing. So there's just a huge potential for fraud and abuse. But that aside, Cory, the main thrust, and we only have a few minutes left, and I don't want to lose this point, because the message of Extinction Rebellion, the message of Greta Thunberg is, and we don't have time, is that, she says, our house is on fire. She was talking to British parliamentarians this week, and she says, you lied to us. She said, you told us you were going to do something to halt climate change, as if you could halt, whatever's changing, as if you could halt it, right? But anyway, she said, you lied to us. She said, you've ruined my future, essentially. So she's talking in past tense, and the NLP, the neuro-linguistic programming here, is very, very specific. And she's been fed lines, and she's delivered those lines very well. And so she's talking in past tense. Now that's inferring that it's already too late. And we see this same theme in We Don't Have Time's marketing videos and viral pieces that they put out. So the idea is this, almost like this end of times narrative. It's like end times eschatology in Christianity or Islam or Judaism. It's the same thing, but it's transferred over to this new environmental framework. Okay, this narrative. Okay, so she's saying you've screwed up, so I'm going to basically abuse and berate you as adults. The older generation has ruined it, and we won't live to see adulthood. This is the message, essentially, that Greta is delivering, for her benefactors or the people behind her, and it's very clever. And what it means is that we can be extra aggressive, and the children are going to, hold you adults to account. And so I understand there's good intentions, Cory, behind this. I totally am on board with environmental conservation and, eliminating pollution and preserving the ecosystem in all its ways. Okay, but what is the cost of brainwashing a generation to think that they're not going to be alive to see adulthood? Because I think essentially this is what's kind of going on through this kind of campaigning. To me, it's kind of, there's a dark aspect to it. It looks like a religion to me, Cory. It's very similar to, end of times eschatology you find in religion as well.
It definitely is. I mean, John Stupling has done some brilliant work in the past couple months to that effect, trying to sort of make sense of what, he's taking what you're saying and really articulating it in a beautiful but dark way in his work. I think people should check that out. I don't know what to say. It's just completely disgusting. There's a lot we can do to protect and nurture and regenerate nature and our ecosystems and that. And it sure isn't going to happen by a further plundering of the planet and just keep doing what we're doing. And this girl's, it's sad because I'm sure everyone around her is telling her that she is actually saving the world, right? Like, I agree with you. It is cult-like what we see, and using fear, basically terrorizing children and the populace at large, just so, just to maintain the suicidal economic system that's in place that makes so many people miserable. It hurts so much. And, I just wanted to add another thing about the financialization, the offsets, everything you were speaking of. Like, it is so gross. Not only are they exploiting the youth, but they always, and AOC just came out with a video with Naomi Klein too, and they always use and appropriate Native imagery and always talk about, Indigenous, rights, minority rights. And it's such bullshit, because all this stuff does is displace those most vulnerable who are already paying the price, for a handful of people living well in the world. There's the majority of people that suffer, because of it. And so this causes huge displacement. And this new Green Deal, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, it promises the further of imperialism. That it promises more wars. It promises more displacement. For what? To keep the billionaires are terrified that they could one day end up like us, on equal footing.
And is there any evidence, lastly, is there any scientific evidence that we're going to die in 12 years, humanity will be extinct, or we'll reach a tipping point in 10 or 12 years where we're just going to, and it's because of the industrial, fossil fuels, for instance, or, that's another question that is not really challenged either, I think, in this discussion.
I mean, what I've decided in my head, and I've read tons, I've written about climate change, I write about the environment, I read. We could die in 12 seconds. We can die in 12 years. We can die in, maybe people will die in 1,200 years. We don't know. No one knows, And so I think we should, to me, what I've seen, climate change, the focus on climate change has destroyed environmental activism. I mean, it used to be that a tree was iconic, that represented nature. Now a wind turbine represents nature, but it doesn't. It represents technology. It represents tech. But we identify it almost like it's become symbolic, like God, iconic. Right? It's social engineering, and it's insane. I mean, the whole climate movement is a big green lobby group. I mean, no one's even talking about water, oceans, trees, only to make them into, a commodified, objectified thing, to be bought and sold. I mean, I think we really need to, take a step back, and look at this. This is insane. It's crazy, what's happening.
And I'll my last parting thought, Mike, is that people should also realize that the emergence of this campaign really taking the whole environmental, Mike, I was very much, ever since I was probably 19 or 20, very kind of active environmental campaigner. I was involved in a few things since I was a late teenager, right, in California, and also about preserving Amazon rainforest. And the penny dropped for me when I found that no one was interested in, all of a sudden in 2006, nobody was interested in preserving ecological diversity or the virgin forest in the Amazon basin, because there were no carbon offsets or credits involved. No one. It didn't have anything to do, quote, with climate change. That new or global warming, as it was called at the time, man-made global warming, and all the energy just got sucked into one issue. And fracking was introduced at the exact same time, and that is not a coincidence. And I'm telling you right now. And if you look at some of the people promoting fracking in the media, the journalists and the politicians, and you look at the timing of this, and Al Gore himself, okay, and you look at his business activities, I don't think that's a coincidence, Mike, that was both, these were launched at the same time. There was zero opposition to fracking. It didn't come online. People didn't, there was no awareness of it. They had sucked the whole environmental movement off to one side.
Well, Patrick, there was the, I hope I didn't cut off Mike. There was the 350 and different groups did the Keystone XL campaign. And basically that exact same thing happened. The whole nation, the whole North America focused on one single pipeline. You know how many pipelines there are on the planet. And in the meantime, Warren Buffett built $1 billion rail dynasty. And, you know, he's just made billions. Warren Buffett, who through his foundation Novo, pumped in between $30 and $40 million to the Tides Foundation that funneled it all out to the NGOs doing the Keystone XL pipeline. You know, and that campaign, like once it's, I mean, now all over Canada, all of the oil is on trains. I mean, you must have heard about the accident in Montreal that killed about 50 people. Yeah. You know, some were vaporized. That's the oil that went on the trains. And there was not, maybe aside from a couple small grassroots groups, that just went completely under the radar. It just was allowed to build and build during the exact same time as that Keystone XL campaign. And again, Bill Gates, same thing. He's invested in CN Rail in Canada. All the oil. I mean, it's just insane. It's just,
Bill Gates is invested in that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and him and Buffett are tight, right? Like, if you want to know what's happening, you have to stop listening and following NGOs like 350 of Us and whatever. You have to follow, Bloomberg, and you have to follow the financial, all the financial stock markets, magazines, whatever they're called, websites. That's where Forbes. I mean, that's where all the information is of what's happening.
That's interesting, Cory, because we don't have time. The tech firm in Sweden who's backing and launched Greta Thunberg, that's actually the founder there, Leica Consulting, so financial communications firm, and they've just sold to Fund by Me, I believe that was in your article, 100% of their shares. That's a financial communications, essentially PR company behind We Don't Have Time.
Yeah, I mean, and they also have coaches. Like, it's a really bizarre little outfit. I mean, they hope to be bigger than Facebook. But, I mean, put it into perspective. If we don't have time, we have 12 years. How do we have time to be creating foolish apps? How's that saving the planet? How's that saving our ecosystems? Right? How's that cleaning our water, protecting our water, anything? I mean, what's that have to do with anything? It's just so stupid. I saw someone defending the XR business, saying we have to bring in businesses and how important it is that we'll have recyclable potato chip bags. And it's like, but I thought we have 12 years. I thought it was an emergency. We're going to actually put time into worrying about chip bags.
Yeah.
I mean, what?
I think my personal, this Swedish tech startup, they're wanting to create this TripAdvisor, which is essentially going to act, I think it's going to end up being like the digital Taliban of the the green economy, basically the moral police, if you will. It won't end with companies, Mike. It's going to be people are going to get raided. Okay. There's going to be little student green police running around, okay, raiding people, businesses, putting people out of business. It's mayhem, potentially. It's like,
right? It's like green fascism. Like, you basically, you this is what we have to do, and you believe in us and support us, or we all die, and you're going to die too. So, you have to support the fourth industrial revolution at sea. We have the answers. We have the solutions. It's only us. No one else can save you but us, right? And then if you dissent, then you're bad. And, you're like, you don't like Greta, you don't like children. It's a real lapse in critical thinking,
Where this is beginning, Patrick, is in schools. And of course, the school strike is part of what Greta's all about. But in schools, in this city, in every city, they're all bought into this. Mm-hmm. If you're a student in a school, you're not allowed to offer any other point of view. It's 100% on this agenda.
Don't question it.
Don't question it.
It sounds a lot like church, Mike. But it just my last thought about Igmar Renshag, who's the CEO or the head of We Don't Have Time and Leica Consulting, who just sold out to Funded by Me, big crowdfunding outfit. Okay, I know where this is going, Mike. There's an exit strategy for every tech company. And once Facebook or Google adopt the green badge system, they will buy this company out when they have X amount of users. So as soon as they hit the 500, 200 million mark or whatever, boom, there's a multi-billion-dollar buyout for We Don't Have Time. Facebook or Google will suck them up like they do with every tech company, and this guy will become a billionaire overnight. That's how this works.
And then he will create a foundation himself.
Bingo. You should be in charge, Mike. You should get a job with Google. Maybe Google Futures can hire Mike Robinson. You understand how this system works. Cory, it's a very deep, it's very complex, but I think if people start with your 6-part series, if they read through, there's a link on the show page. You do invest the time. I believe that you will understand what you're looking at by the time you even get a quarter of a way through the material that you published. So I do encourage people to check out your work, Cory. And we're just beginning to sort of get a clear read on this and sort of begin to prioritize what are the main points of this story, and then start to communicate that with more people. But, yeah.
Mike and Patrick, thank you both for having me on.
Yeah, thank you, Cory, and we look forward to your future work on this. And do check out The Wrong Kind of Green. This is Cory's blog. It's a great resource, not just on this subject, by the way, but you can go right back, and it's very meticulous. The links are there. The research is there, and you will then understand what the not-for-profit industrial complex really is, how it's connected to transnational corporations and governments, and you can then really get a picture of what's behind the scenes in this facade that we see every day that we think is grassroots, but actually is not grassroots at all. But anyway, thank you very much, Cory. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And there she goes, ladies and gentlemen. That's Cory Morningstar. She is the author of this 6-part series, which is available right now on her blog, The Wrong Kind of Green. That is linked on our show page right now, The Manufacturing of Greta Thunberg for Consent, the Manufacturing of Consent. A lot of people should understand what that means, Noam Chomsky's work. The Political Economy of the Not-for-Profit Industrial Complex. Look, Mike, I'm sure this is going to be covered more, and we'll be talking hopefully to Cory and others more on this subject as time goes by. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to